Hello everyone, welcome to the classroom part 2. Thank you so much for joining us as always. Today we'll be continuing our review of the horrible war arc of My Hero Academia. Once again, thank you for joining us as always. Now this is a continuation of my video from last week where I began reviewing the Paranormal Liberation war arc. And if you're wondering why I'm awful chipper and handsome, you think I'm handsome, but I said this arc is horrible, keep in mind the next time you watch the news that this kind of corporate speak can make anything sound good. Also, keep in mind that I will do a little bit of lying to my audience from time to time. I actually really like this arc. But I used the word horrible to make it seem like I hated this arc, to drive clicks, when really I was just simply expressing that this war is horrible in the sense that all war is horrible. Also try and keep that in mind when you watch the news. So if you did not check out the video from last week, please go watch that one because I will not be giving any context for what I say next. It's time for the outside part, boy. While last week I mostly talked about the lead up to and story context for this arc, as well as some important events like Dobby's dance and the death of Wait, what? Yeah, somehow last week I made the mistake of saying that Gran Torino dies in this arc. I meant to say that he nearly dies. I really don't know how that slipped in, but trust me, no one is more upset about it than me. It honestly makes me wanna
take a swan dive off the roof of the building.
So as I said in the last video, this is my first intentional two-parter, and one thing I really like about this format so far is that we can get into the meat of this video much quicker. In the last video, I talked about the pro-hero side of things mostly, but this video is gonna be for the teens. And one way we can reach out to these radical youngsters is to talk about how this war is testing and changing the relationships between so many of our characters. I want to start off with probably the least important thing I'll be talking about today, Class 1A versus Gigantomachia. Imagine fighting a giant in a war at the age of 15, and then some soy boy on the internet just goes, "It was okay. It was fine." Class 1A versus Gigantomachia feels really easy to forget in the sea of all the more intimate character moments, but I really enjoy this fight. One thing Horikoshi does really well with his side casts, specifically classes 1A and B, is their combo moves. Most of the students have very underdeveloped quirks. I would say more simple, but I wouldn't even say that something like Katsuki's explosion is much more complex than, say, Kaminari's electrification, but they let Katsuki develop it so much more. But what Horikoshi does with these underdeveloped, weak little bitch boy beta quirks is really fun. We've been seeing them do this kind of stuff since the cavalry battle of the sports festival, but slowly their plans have gotten more developed, and we can even see Class 1A and B combine their powers now. Then there are individually great moments among the more ancillary students, like Kirishima finally getting to step in to protect Mina, and all thanks to a little dye job. Speaking of popular ships, Kaminari gets a really awesome moment where not only does he completely shut down a Liberation Army commander, but he gets a genuinely adorable moment where he realizes he wants to fight to protect Jiro. Also, Momo makes fucking artillery, which is insanely cool. The wartime fun, however, is quickly crushed with the death of their favorite teacher, Miss Midnight. Remember when you would see your teacher at the grocery store and it would be like, imagine if then they died. Midnight's sudden death isn't that sad on, like, her character, unless you've read Vigilantes, but what I think is so messed up about it either way is how sudden and unceremonious it is. It feels like a tragic pairing to the students having their biggest win as real heroes so far, learning that they'll have to almost die to win, and losing comes so easily. Moving up the ladder of importance all the way to the birdhouse of heroics, I wanted to just very quickly touch on how fucked up this must be for Tokoyami. Learning that his mentor just ended up being the MHA equivalent of those hot girls they put on Tik Tok to try to get you to join the army, and he's a murderer, and he's a slut, he's a slutty little slut. And the last thing I want to briefly cover before I get to the big three of this video is the dynamic between Toga and Uraraka. One of the biggest themes in MHA is sympathy towards our villains, not just for them being like crazy or something, but for how the system abandons them and then, well, vilifies them for being on the outskirts of society, the outskirts that they were shoved towards. While Uraraka and Toga to many are seemingly just stock girl, you can really appreciate them when you view them through each other. They're both romantics, being a little lovesick for the same boy, but whereas Uraraka looks up to Deku and wants to be more like him, Toga wants to drink his blood. Oh, right, I should explain that. Because of Toga's quirk, when she drinks someone's blood, she can copy their appearance and now quirk at will. They're both basically kids who feel the same way about a boy, one of the most normal things ever, but because of the squeamish nature of Toga's quirk, when Uraraka eventually comes to a point where Toga realizes that she'll never really help her, she goes back to the people who will. The villains. Now folks, let's get down to the most important anticipated part of the video. Deku, Bakugou, Shigaraki, and self-promotion. Folks, if you like the video, please make sure that you like the video. Please subscribe and ring the bell if you want to see more content like this. And most importantly, please comment. I love having discussions with my audience, which is why I've made it a personal rule to reply to every comment, as long as the commenter is not being a dick. That's the rule here, folks. Thank you so much for listening to that, but let's get right down to business and... First, let's talk about Bakugou and Deku, since while Bakugou is my favorite character in the entire series, I have significantly less to say about this dynamic right now when compared to the others. Really, it's just fantastic to see him and Deku tag teaming an opponent together, since the first time they did this, Bakugou had to first assault Deku and then literally be unconscious. My favorite example of how their relationship has progressed was actually in a flashback while Deku trains his body as it goes through one-for-all puberty. Bakugou confronts All Might over him possibly putting Deku in grave danger, seething at the idea that there's something he hasn't been telling Deku. And that's like nuts. Bakugou is confronting All Might, the symbol of strength in his universe. The man who he has modeled his idea of victory around, over the safety of Deku, who at one point I'm still pretty sure he tried to murder. Plus all of his bravado and confidence, taunting Shigaraki even though they are in completely different leagues, was just the classic Bakugou that I love. Speaking of Deku and One for All, this arc really got Deku to connect a lot more with his inner selves as he continues to unlock more quirks and learn about the significance of the... oh boy. I'm sorry, but every time that Deku goes into that weird one-for-all void, I just, what's the phrase? I don't really give a fuck. While I am extremely happy to see him going more and more feral, the stuff with the other users is not as interesting to me right now. When he reaches peak feral with the next arc, I think it might have time to breathe a bit more and get me to care, but I actually do like how they use this idea with Shigaraki. First off, I appreciate that he's finally both hot and sexy and a cutie, and able to go toe-to-toe with the hero society that he talks so much shit on. I also love how he's finally grown into a villain with, like, actual points. His whole speech about why they have heroes and villains has become one of my favorite moments for him. Basically reiterating that this new age of cops, plus celebrity, plus social media, how could that go wrong, has let people fall so far down through the cracks that they've formed massive criminal gangs. Oh, sorry, massive superpowered criminal gangs. And once you call someone a villain and once they put on the tights, you can't really try to get them help anymore. You've just gotta punch them really fucking hard. But let's take it back to the funky, quirky stuff that both Shiggy and Deku are dealing with, where I don't care as much about seeing the former One-for-All wielders. Except Shimura. I find the Shiggy version of it interesting if we think about the little guy for a sec, and especially how old Potato Papa treats him. Shigaraki coming from an abusive home, being taken in by his mentor, and being literally groomed to hate All Might is a pretty classic abuse metaphor, and there are even additional details like the hands constantly groping him. Well, All For One taking control of Shigaraki's body for his own use can be seen as a continuation of the cycle of abuse. Now, before we wrap up the video real quick, I'm going to get into a couple things from this arc that I was not a big fan of, which is a shame, because you always want to have fun in war. I always figured it was only a matter of time until Lemillion gets his quirk back, and I never believed that Best Jeanist was actually dead, but I really hated how they were handled. Best Jeanist is the one that I'm less angry at. I definitely don't care about him as much. I don't think I've ever cried over him, and certainly not more than once. Him coming in and putting in the dancing band from Footloose on Dobby was pretty cool, especially the giant metal fibers, but it just felt extremely anticlimactic and not worthy of the best dressed in Hero Society. And Mirio coming back in this way, just so sudden, and we don't even see him get his fucking quirk back. I just genuinely really dislike the way that Horikoshi handled this, but I can still enjoy his Yakuza story arc and just pretend that he comes back later or like dies getting hit by a car because he tries to permeate and then he can't and he's like in the grill of the car and they have to like pull him out of it and like his guts are coming out. And like My Hero Academia's Paranormal Liberation War arc, written by Kohei Horikoshi and animated by Studio Bones, is a great example of how to still prioritize characterization and emotionally driven storytelling while still getting to have your war arc. I can't really recommend it just on its own, based on just what it is, really, but I still can absolutely recommend that if you are a fan of My Hero Academia, you gotta stick with the series long enough to get here. But that is the video for this week, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us as always. I will see you next week. I promise. Goodbye. Hey y'all, thank you so much for watching that video, and if you made it to this point, a special double thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a sec. So I put out the part 1 of the video, and then I was just in kind of like a tough place mentally. I was very negative. It was really, really hard for me to do anything without like hating it, and this is like a passion thing for me. I don't make money on this yet. But I really want to get to the point where I'm making money on it, so I can't burn myself out just quite yet. But I'm really happy to be back. I'm really happy to be talking to all y'all again. I hope that you're happy to have me back, and if you're not, I'm gonna cry. But anyways, what I have to show off for my collection this week is something I've wanted for a very long time. This is the volume 1 of the deluxe edition of Hellsing. I had never read or seen Hellsing before, but, I mean, like, come on, look how cool this is. It's amazing. It's super cool. It's about the vampire Alucard. He is sort of the fist of the Hellsing organization who hunt vampires and other various ghouls and goblins. It's a great read. It's really good. Integra, super hot. I think that's all I've got to say. I will see y'all next week. Goodbye.